All right, you're back for more. So happy to see you. Excellent. Thanks for coming back. This bonus video just helps you think a little bit more about how climate activism has been portrayed in the media. And to do this, I want to compare a couple of different stories and tell us what does it say about how different organisations or different viewpoints present and perceive the idea of climate activism and this kind of disruptive action that we talked about in the previous video. Here are two newspaper articles about the same day of action by Just Stop Oil, but they present the story in two very different ways, and part of that's down to the context that each of these newspapers come from. The story on the left comes from thesun.co.uk, which is the website of The Sun, a tabloid newspaper which many people would argue is quite conservative. And the story on the right comes from theguardian.com, which is the website of The Guardian newspaper, a broadsheet, more liberal, I suppose, many people would argue as well. I want you to compare these stories using a set of questions on the next slide. No news story happens by accident, and when you see an article like this, everything has been carefully crafted to represent a set of beliefs and to maybe encourage people to believe something themselves. So I want you to break down each of these news stories and try to understand what do they want us to believe about disruptive direct action and this protest in particular. So and I've got some questions on the back of that worksheet. You should have it either from the previous session or the teacher should have distributed it to you now. Thanks, teacher. And I want you to use these ideas to break it down. The words and images. What words and images have been chosen? What did the writer want to evoke in you with this choice of words? And when we're talking about framing, we're talking about the ideas that the story chooses to focus on, but it also chooses to leave some things out. So which ideas are presented, what's left out, and why? The implied reality. Now, when an author is writing something, obviously they take for granted that you maybe share some of their ideas or that they are representing some of their ideas. So what picture of the world is in the background that the story paints? What facts does the writer assume are obvious and true? And then when we're talking about values, what are the core beliefs of that each writer of each story? What does the writer of each story seem to believe or want you to believe? I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to break down that story using these questions on that worksheet, and then we'll check in again in about 5 minutes. Good luck. Here's your 30-second warning, finish up your conversations, and we're going to break it down in a second. I hope you found this useful. Here's some of my answers. They're not necessarily right, but this is what I got when I broke these articles down using the same questions. In the left, the article from The Sun has pictures that focus on the action, an action, and an arrest, the punishment for doing an action. The article on the right has pictures of people with signage and demands. And I guess these images kind of imply, well, on the left it implies that they're doing things and being punished, and on the right, the signage and demands kind of show that they have a reason for doing things. I don't know, that's what I understand. On the left, the article uses words like eco-idiot, but the right describes them as climate activists. The article on the left describes a protest, whereas the article on the right describes it as part of a global action. So the language that the articles choose paint a version of reality that we're going to look at in a second. I think it's also really important to look at the framing of these articles. The article from The Sun focuses on individuals and individual things that they're doing, whereas on the right they're talking about the collective. Now the difference between that, I suppose, is that one individual is very easy to ignore, but a collective movement is much more difficult to ignore. So there's a political set of decisions and a set of decisions about how you paint these people that is different in each of these media articles. The article from The Sun refers to, now this is really interesting because the article from The Sun doesn't actually report on the M25 protest. The article from The Sun talks about the soup protest that happened a month or 2 months before this, and that this soup protester was involved in another action. So again, by talking about the previous controversial action, this article actually seems to somehow diminish or break down the importance of the current action, whereas the article from The Guardian is referring to the current action and representing what they're doing on the M25. Another interesting choice about how the two authors have decided to portray these articles. The Sun article talks about the consequences of the protest, that it's misery for motorists, whereas the Guardian article talks about the intention of the protesters, that they have the intention to go against private aviation. So the difference there, I suppose, is thinking about why are they acting and what is the reasons for this. And that really kind of becomes clear when we start to think about the implied reality. In the left article, on the article from The Sun, we see that they don't really describe what the problem is. It doesn't say what the problem is, just the people are protesting. It's kind of ununderstandable. They don't really offer you a reason for this protest. Whereas on the right, in The Guardian, they're saying, this is the problem. The problem is private jets. The problem is frequent flyers. If we think about the solution, if there's not really an understandable problem, then your solution seems a bit mad, doesn't it? Just throw soup against things and protest. But if you have a reason to protest and then you have a solution and you offer a solution like banning jets and taxing flyers, this sounds a whole lot more reasonable. So the two versions of, I suppose, the implied reality maybe on the Sun article is that these people are acting without reason, and the people on the right, in the article on the right, the people are acting according to a set of demands and proposals. So a clear difference in the kind of implied reality. Also, there's a really sneaky thing that the Sun article does, which is they talk about this person who's already on bail. So by presenting that they're already on bail, they kind of suggest that this person is a criminal, and again, undermining their capacity to act or their legitimacy perhaps as an actor. And finally, I asked you to break it down in terms of values. What does the author of each article seem to believe? And in this one, I think probably it's become clear that the Sun kind of seems to present or believe that protesting in this way or for this cause is just a bit idiotic. You know, you're not doing it for any reason. You're disruptive. You're a criminal, and that these kind of actions aren't justified. Whereas in the right, in the article from The Guardian, it seems to sort of suggest that perhaps protesting is a way to speak to power as a collective group, and that also that the climate crisis is worth taking action on. So for me, when I analysed those articles, those are some of the ideas that I came up with. You might have found some other ones, and if you did, fantastic, great. I just want to give you an opportunity to analyse a couple of different articles. These are ones I found in the last couple of days, actually. There's a youth climate activist called Saoirse Exton. She's from Limerick. And she's very active with the Fridays for Future movement and in lots of other capacities as well. Recently, she's been invited to take part in the UN Youth Advisory Group on climate change. Now, here are two articles that came out within 5 days of each other. The one on the left is from the United Nations website, and it's not necessarily media in the same way that we understand media, but I'm going to offer it to you as an example because I think it tells a very different contrast to an article that was from the Limerick Post on the right there. So I'm going to invite you to analyse these stories using the same questions that we had from before and work together. Here's your 30-second warning, finish up your conversations, and we're going to break it down in a second. All right, your follow-on task from this session is to find and analyse a recent story about climate activism in the media. It can be about some kind of protest, it can be about prosecution for a protest. There's a lot happening very recently with Greta Thunberg in the UK. I want you to find something, I want you to analyse it, maybe using the same thing, come out with a conclusion. What does this say about how climate activism is represented in the media? And I want you to tag it as well. Irish Schools Sustainability Network, or at Irish Schools Susty. You can tag us at Gap Ireland and use the hashtag Climate and Nature Summit. Again, here are your reflection questions. What have I learned about climate activism? How have my feelings changed? And is there anything I'll do after this session? Thanks so much for watching and enjoy the rest of the week.